Happy November. If you're here, congratulations for having survived 2020 thus far. That is a feat in and of itself. So we're very happy that you're all here. We know how challenging this is to make space and make time. So we're very, very grateful that you're here to join our ambassador community. And we have some really exciting things to talk about today. You're going to hear from our internal Remake team, some old faces, some new faces you haven't seen on these calls yet. And we're going to be talking about our transparency report, which is critical in our activism and holding brands accountable. It's critical in the role that you can play as a consumer and how you can hold brands accountable. So we're really excited to talk about that. A few people still joining, so I'm going to keep letting those people in and give everyone else a chance to join. Ayesha, while I continue to let everyone join, I'd love for you to just say good morning and kind of, start to tell our audience why creating this transparency report is so important and the role that it plays in our activism to hold brands accountable.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, good morning or good evening, everyone, depending on, I see some of our friends from across the pond. It's always so lovely. These are my favorite things to do at the beginning of every month, to see all of our community. At Remake, one of our main focuses is transparency, because we sincerely believe that sunshine is the best disinfectant. It's the way for us to not just hold the industry accountable, but also to shop our values. This transparency report was months and months in the making, and Chelsea and Jessie, part of our team, are here to share more about the methodology. But why we did it, really this was in service to all of you. In the early days of Remake, a lot of our transparency was focused on bringing worker voices, maker voices to you all through our docuseries, running campaigns like our Pay Up campaign to hold the industry accountable. But time and time again, all of you kept telling us, I want to know who are the worst brands, I want to know who are the best brands. And so we spent time engaging with water experts, climate experts, labor experts, looking at other methodologies out there. And one of the things that we realized was that there's really a gap in the market, in that much as we at Remake look at these issues from an intersectional way, a lot of the reports didn't do that. There was the climate folks talking about it from an environmental lens. There was the labor people looking at labor rights issues. But as we started to look at the same brands who were in some way serial offenders from plundering our natural resources, not doing right by climate, it's the exact same brands who were doing the same on the labor side. So, the first I'd say is that this report is very much intersectional. I think the second is it's really written for the everyday person to understand. And so as Rebecca will show you, it's visual. We take no money from the corporate sector, no affiliate marketing, so much unlike, influencers or others pushing product out there. That the up-and-comers and the rock star brands that we've shared with you right before the holiday season, it's because we really believe in these brands. And it's to say, shopping with them really does allow us to wear our values. So that was really the thinking. We need better reporting. Until the industry doesn't do that, we'll hold them to count. And outside of holding them accountable, it's a way for all of us to buy from the brands that are doing better, especially as we think about Thanksgiving and Christmas and all of that good stuff.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm so excited. We still have people joining. If you're continuing to join, thank you for being here. What we're going to go over today is Remake's Transparency Report. We're really excited to share that with you. Please chat in and tell us where you're joining from. We always love to see that. So I'm going to start my screen share so we can start to walk through, and we're going to kind of break this report down for you, show it to you in a way that is super understandable. Like Ayesha said, it's really easy to dive into. It's very visual, and we're going to lay it out for you so that you know how to navigate it and to take action with it. So this is the full report, which you will have access to. We'll follow up this call by giving you access to this. At the end of the call, we're actually going to walk you through our directory that is live on our website. So we're going to be releasing these tools that are going to be something that you can engage with very interactively. So I would like to, Jessie, are you here? Are you ready on the call?
Yep. Hi.
Hi, good morning. So Jessie, thank you so much for being here. Jessie is on our Remake team. And Jessie, I would like for you to speak about, the metrics and the grading rubric of this report and why we chose these specific factors when we were looking at, you know, how brands were qualified and you know, kind of what we were holding them accountable for to be on this transparency report.
Yeah, sure. So to start, if you've been on our directory, what you've seen is a list of approved brands, but behind each of those approvals is us in the background going through 5 key areas for each brand to determine how sustainable they are. So those areas are transparency and traceability. We look at maker well-being, focusing on the workers themselves and the social part of the score. There's environmental sustainability, so water, waste, carbon, and how brands are faring on that end. And then sustainable raw materials, so going really deep into the supply chain and looking at if they are taking care of the workers who are even picking the cotton, for example. And then leadership was our final section, just seeing how the brand is and are they taking charge and saying that you don't need to overconsume, even though that might hurt their profits. So looking at the overall picture. So this year, with everything going on concerning Black Lives Matter and the movement in that space, we decided to expand the criteria to include diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that is now part of that 5th area, which you see at the bottom there, making up 8% of the score. So what we noticed overall, which I suppose we'll get into when we look at the report, but most brands or all brands tended to have their score go down once we started including diversity and inclusion, which is really unfortunate. So now these are the 5 areas. We're going to keep diversity and inclusion as part of the score moving forward. And as always, if you have suggestions for brands that you want us to look at, you can shoot an email over.
Yeah, we're going to actually show them that live, how they can request brands and do that when we do a live walkthrough at the end with Chelsea of the directory. So yeah, that's really important. And I think it's important to note to everyone, you know, a lot of times when people think about sustainable fashion, they tend to focus on, oh, well, it means eco-friendly, or it means natural materials or organics or non-toxins and things like that. But if you've been with our Remake community for a while now, you know that we are a worker-centered movement and that we are all about championing the voice of the worker. So Ayesha, I'd love for you to speak just a little bit about why that's an often overlooked category in terms of a brand sustainability, and why folding in that leadership and diversity and inclusion is so directly related to the worker well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one of the things, especially as us as a sustainable, conscious-minded community have been asking more for sustainability, for ethics in the industry has been very quick to co-opt what is low-hanging fruit. And so as we've been looking at, especially the larger brands who market themselves as sustainable, the conversation is often stuck around sustainable materials or capsule collections. And what we were really struck by was how little to any information there was on the human rights, labor rights, gender justice side of things. And the truth is, it's because that side of things costs money. You know, at the end of the day, if the people who make our clothes are to make a living wage, are allowed to collectively bargain, are allowed to be a part of unions, that costs money. If the communities who are going to be left better off are going to be part and parcel of the maker well-being dynamics within a brand, that means that a brand has to really be working more closely in their supply chain rather than pushing the risk onto their factories. And so this was really important to us. We really do see that the brands that are thinking of this in an intersectional way tend to have the right leadership in place. And interestingly, obviously, this has a lot of implications for diversity and inclusion as well. You know, as Jessie said, a lot of brands are very quick in the wake of Black Lives Matter to be very performative, you know, putting squares out on Instagram saying they stand in solidarity. But when we were looking at executive level leadership, when we're looking at board support, when we're looking at who are the people making the decisions, there really isn't very much diversity and inclusion. And so that really matters when a lot of our product comes from around the world. A lot of our supply chains are from the global south and built by Black and brown women. And so we really do see these two things, maker well-being and diversity and inclusion, going hand in hand.
Thank you. And we're going to talk about how, some of the things that are at play here are also the economics of scale. And we're going to kind of dive into, as we talk to this, a large, very large brand that, has to rely on massive consumption versus these smaller capsule brands that can kind of approach this in a different way. And these are all very important things to consider when we're talking through this. So I wanted to give you a snapshot here of the vetting criteria so that you can see the report live. It's not letting me go back, pardon me. Oop, hang on just a second, guys. Let me go back so we can see here. I want Jessie to talk again real quick through so you can see the vetting criteria that's being used here in the report in kind of a little bit more detail. And this is these reports for each brand. You will have access to this information to actually see, this is what we call their scorecard, to see their scorecard by brand and to see kind of where they fall in these areas. But Jessie, for some of the people who might not be familiar with the Higg Index or the Good on You app or what Fair Trade, I know we don't have time to dive into all that, but can you kind of talk about how all these factors work together in your vetting criteria to be able to assess these different components that you spoke to?
Yeah, so I think one thing we've noticed is that the industry is pretty compartmentalized. So there's so many different ratings and features that try to assess how sustainable a company is. And for the most part, they are all doing the best that they can. But still, what we found is there is a shortage because none of them are comprehensive. So I mentioned the 5 sections that we look at. What we found across the board is that a lot of these other, so for example, the Higg Index might focus more on labor rights and the environment, but they're not looking at diversity and inclusion. They're not looking at accessibility. Same with CDP, they're focused solely on the environment, looking at carbon, but what about the makers and the workers? So on our end, it was trying to find something comprehensive that looks at everything, because we think all of it is important. All of it means that you're having a sustainable brand. And so that's where the remake criteria came from. I also think that we've been really good about adapting and improving the criteria as we go along, which you don't always see with some of the other options as well. So this is a great way to know that if a brand is remake approved, then most likely it covers all of the other criteria that are out there as well.
Yeah, and I think how dynamic it is so important, and the fact that we are willing to constantly evolve it. And again, you'll see that as we kind of dive through the directory, all the different facets that you can look into. And you're right, it's so important. This can tend to be very segmented. So being able to look at all of this comprehensively is very critical, because, as Ayesha, I want you to talk to when we look at some of the criteria brands, greenwashing is very easy to do when you focus on just a specific sector that you're paying attention to, and you try to shine all the light on that sector and all the attention to, whether it's just a capsule or a specific material or a specific, one factor in your supply chain, in order to kind of divert attention away from the much more holistic picture that's at play here.
Yeah, and one other thing I'd say, Rebecca, in terms of the methodologies was, we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. And so Jessie and I were very particular about what's already been done and what's not out there. And I think the biggest thing is that a lot of the reporting and auditing are paid for by brands. They're on behalf of brands. There's not a lot of information in the public domain. The Higg Index, for example, has promised for a very long time to put more information for citizens to capture, but it's just not there. And for us, this was really important for our community to say, the only way to hold brands accountable is if they publish their policies, if they publish their findings, and then we're able to interpret them for you. So, if a brand is doing amazing things in secret, but not putting anything out there for us to measure, then they don't score in our system. And I think that's really important to know, because for too long, the entire sort of way of controlling the data and the narrative has been brand-led rather than citizen-led. And this is what we're really out to do.
Cool. I know you guys are so excited. So without further ado, we're going to start to dive into this so you can get a sneak peek of some of these brands and how we rank them. So there's going to be multiple ways that we can look at this. We're going to rank them by kind of where they land on this scale. Are they a rock star? Are they an up-and-comer? Are they an offender? Are they a wannabe? Then we're also going to go further into how you can look at different criteria. You can look at them by price, by category, all kinds of cool stuff. So since you're super excited, let's dive into some of the rock stars. So it's important to understand, and we do say this here, there is no perfect brand, right? But the following 10 brands, are on their way. They're showing leadership, they're showing initiative, they're showing transparency, and they're really dedicated to making the effort. So we've got some really, really exciting peeps like Outerknown. We've had some of the Outerknown. We've had Meg from Outerknown on our calls before. She's talked to us about their sustainability initiatives. A lot of the work that they do with vetting materials and paying attention to labor and getting all of that certified. Nudie and Mud Jeans have always been rock stars, from day one. They started their companies, with all of these kind of core sustainability initiatives really baked into their business model. It's also exciting to see some older designers, more established designers like Mara Hoffman, who have been around for a while, who have completely revamped and pivoted how they run their business, how they source their supply chain, how they work with, all of the garment makers within their supply chain. And then we've got, some of the OGs like, Patagonia that have kind of, started with disruption in mind and have continued, with those core values, and even kind of taken that further as they start to engage more with politics and policy and things like that. So there's a lot of different ways, again, to incorporate this. You'll see that every brand has a score. You see below them, you can see 65 points, 57 points, 74 points. Ayesha, can you speak to really quickly, what is the threshold? What score do you have to qualify to be an approved remake brand? And where does that rank on the scale?
Yeah, and Jessie can speak to this some more as well, but it's a score out of 100. As we've said, no brand is perfect. It's interesting to see that even the rock stars in some ways are just squeaking by. But the truth is that, we hold the industry to a very high standard, and it's about doing more good rather than less harm. And there is no way, the way the scoring is set up, for you to be really good on one category and not do anything on the other. So if you aren't thinking about human rights, but are thinking about environmental issues, you're never going to reach that 50-point threshold. And so this is why a lot of these brands, even though they're just squeaking by because they're big enough and they have a large enough supply chain, we do still applaud them for thinking of these issues, whether on the climate side and on the human rights side. Interestingly, when we added the D&I, the diversity and inclusion criteria, every one of these brands, we did have to reduce points. And so there is a long way to go in the industry when it comes to be truly embracing diversity and inclusion. And honestly, I think it's a miss when it comes to the industry. Would there be something else you'd add, Jessie?
Just reiterating what you said earlier, that this is all based on public information. So it's really what you as a consumer can find about these brands that is available online or that they're doing, but also talking about. So that's really where a lot of the information that's input into the score comes from.
Absolutely. And, Ayesha, we also talked prior to this call about how rock stars, I know there's Patagonia on here and Outerknown is growing very quickly, but how rock stars tend to be smaller brands with very engaged leadership. We know Mara Hoffman is extremely engaged with the leadership of her brand. Kelly Slater is very engaged with the leadership at Outerknown, but these smaller brands do tend to have a more consolidated supply chain. And this does illustrate how, scale and sustainability are at odds. So I'd like for you to kind of speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, and it's a question we get time and again, particularly because the bigger fast fashion, ultra fast fashion brands have been so quick to co-opt the sustainability conversation. They're often talking about their capsule collections. But the truth is, it's very difficult to retrofit sustainability when your core business model is to move product very quickly, to have lots and lots of factories and subcontracting and layers of it, and to control it. And so one of the things that we have seen is the more a brand grows, and ironically, the more successful it becomes, the less they're really able to meet the human rights and environmental criteria that they set out to do. You can imagine if you're trying to move towards getting carbon under control, if you continue to pump out product, it's very difficult to do that. And it's been fascinating to see some of these rockstar brands thinking about other ways to keep their product in circulation longer, to be thinking about repair as Nudie Jeans does, to be thinking about durability, because that does cut into profit. And so, one of the things we saw in looking at all the big brands is the bigger you get, the harder it is to maintain your sustainability ethos. And so it will be interesting to see, as some of these brands become more popular, what they're really able to do in terms of controlling their supply chain, because it's hard to know when you're in hundreds of factories and dipping in and out what really is happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So with that, let's highlight some more, excuse me, I didn't show you guys this slide, some more of the rock stars, you know, and also the, you know, one thing that you'll be able to do in engaging with directory, as I mentioned, is look by category. So if there's, you know, if you want to look at shoes like Nisolo, or, you know, undergarments like Organic Basics, accessories like Raven and Lily, you can kind of do that through our directory, dive through by category and see where different brands rank. Let's move on to the offenders. So it's much easier to understand why the offenders are offenders, and how easily it is to offend. You know, for transparency and clarity, these guys all scored under 36 points, which means, you know, as it clearly states, that they have chosen profit and scale, you know, over people and planet. And so we're also we're not just going to look at the offenders, but what's really, really important is how, you know, these offenders, you know, and pretty much almost everyone on here has been linked back to our Pay Up Fashion and our Pay Up petition in some way. And so there's a lot of work to be done here. So this doesn't mean just, you know, cancel these guys, walk away, don't shop from them. This means let's get even more vocal in holding these guys accountable and in seeing, you know, how we can call them to take action and to make a difference. Ayesha, I'd love for you to just tie that back real quick to how does this currently relate to Pay Up Fashion, and how can we continue to keep that momentum going by engaging with these offenders?
So, you know, I will say just very quickly on the rockstar categories, one of the things we tried to do was pick, you know, for every single product category, some beautiful brand for you all, so that if you are thinking of your capsule collection, whether it's going from underwear to denim to tops to accessories, there you have it. You have sort of the best of the best. You know, what was interesting, especially as we are tracking, you know, 40 of the top brands that control 97% of the industry's profits. I mean, what's crazy is how consolidated the fashion industry truly is. That time and time again, the brands that are not doing right by workers, where we're having so many of the concerns, especially during COVID, are the same very brands that showed up on this list. So take Urban Outfitters, for example, you know, Free the People, Anthropologie has this reputation of, in somehow, you know, because the look might be a bit more vintage, that they have, you know, a sustainability halo around them. But when it comes to Pay Up campaign, and, you know, starting all the way back in March, when finally we were able to get Gap and some of the other basic brands to engage and pay for contracts, Urban Outfitters has been one brand that has not engaged at all. And so, you know, completely not done right by their workers. I think what's also interesting here is the cast of characters, which is the ones who brought us fast fashion, and then the ones who essentially took that business model and then gave us the ultra fast fashion brands, you know. So with Zara and H&M, in many ways, they are trying to do right. They do engage more. They did pay up, you know, and not cancel orders. Here's brands, especially I think partly because of the European sensibility and our citizenship engagement, that you are able to bring them to the table. But yet one of the challenges with them is that when it comes to paying workers fairly, when it comes to thinking about, you know, the living wage commitments that H&M made and then walked back on, a lot of the union busting cases that we're dealing with, time and time again, it's Inditex, Zara's holding company, and H&M come up. And then Boohoo and Misguided, you know, is in some ways the worst of the worst conditions. You see the points here, you know, 3 points and 5 points, because this is an industry where it's so fast and so cheap, zero engagement, and often they almost fly under the scrutiny, away from a lot of watchdog groups. And, you know, we have seen in the pandemic them behave absolutely terribly, even with the sweatshop campaigns right in the UK. But I would love Jessie to also speak about some of the brands that in some ways have co-opted the sustainability conversation You know, take for example, Allbirds and Everlane, and yet when you actually look under the hood, there really isn't much there. You know, we're just in the process of engaging with Everlane on have you or have you not canceled orders, and the truth is it's a lot of smoke and mirrors, and I don't believe that they've done right by their workers. The final brand I'll point to here is Supreme. You know, very beloved by, you know, the youth community, often has this sort of go-to cool mentality. But what's fascinating about Supreme is also they just got acquired by VF Corporation, which does have a better handle when it comes to their sustainable supply chain. And so acquiring a brand like Supreme and trying to clean it up is going to be interesting, because they, you know, we had nothing when it comes to sustainability that they put out there. You know, they were the lowest scoring brand from the hundreds of brands we looked at, with a grand score of 0. But Jessie, I'd love for you to speak to Everlane and Allbirds as well.
Yeah, I think those are always surprising to find that they aren't as sustainable as they proclaim to be. So especially Everlane, I think the wannabe or the those kinds of offenders are the hardest ones to evaluate, because they have so much content dedicated to sustainability, but the content doesn't actually say anything or prove that they are sustainable brands. So with Allbirds, at the moment, they're doing a lot of one-off carbon footwear lines, where maybe one collection of shoes is going to be carbon neutral, or that's really their main thing. They've been doing some carbon neutral lines, but they don't really talk about their factories. They don't talk about workers' living wages, what kind of programs are happening in the factories, where do they source their materials. They talk about their wool, so that's good. That's probably where some of those 20 odd points came from. But for the most part, there's just really no substance, especially on the social side. Same with Everlane, which is one brand that we've been calling out for a long time, where we just know that they are not as sustainable as they proclaim to be. Their model is transparency, and I think people often confuse that with sustainability. So yes, they have an idea of their price breakdown, which they do share somewhat, but that doesn't mean that they are being transparent about the actual conditions within that supply chain, either on the environment side or the social side. So that's where those two scores came from, which tend to surprise people just because they do showcase themselves as sustainable brands.
And I think it's a really important point, Jessie, that, you know, when it comes to Everlane, this notion of radical transparency, you know, transparency is a tool. And it's, unless you're telling us something of substance, it doesn't matter if you have, you know, pretty pictures of your factories up on your website. At the end of the day, it's, are the people any better off that are making your product? And certainly with the union busting cases with Everlane, and the fact that we're not getting straight answers when it comes to pay up, you know, it's surprising to people if they think of, wow, Everlane and Forever 21 in some ways are in the same point system, but it's because neither of them are telling us much of substance when it comes to the well-being or the environment.
Thank you so much. Thank you, both of you. And sorry, guys, my mouse is super trigger happy. Every time I try to go to check the chat, it changes the slides on you, so I apologize. Let's move on to, excuse me, the wannabes. So what does that mean? So these following 10 brands, they claim that they're, you know, sustainable, and they are making progress, but clearly they haven't impressed us yet, and they haven't, you know, really received our seal of approval. So we're going to walk through these. We're also going to talk to Ayesha, as we talk about the wannabes. I also want to talk about how, you know, the real substantive issue of living wages and overproduction, you know, kind of, you know, the wannabes might try to distract us with these capsule collections, or just focusing a small percentage on sustainable materials, because that's a big part of why they kind of stay in this wannabe category. So Jessie, why don't you kind of walk us through, you know, some of these brands? And you can see a brand like Reformation, you know, although they have 53 points and Madewell has 62 points, which is, you know, technically some of those other brands that have these points are within our threshold. What is it that specifically that kind of keeps these guys, you know, more in this wannabe category instead of, you know, moving up into that rock star status?
Yeah, I think part of it is the desire to grow and to increase consumption, you know, in an era when That's really not acceptable anymore. So for them, especially Reformation, they were higher. I think they had more points at one point, but it's just as they continue to grow, they have less oversight of their supply chain, unfortunately. So we're seeing the same with Madewell, where to begin with, it's just the Madewell Eco Denim collection specifically, which has 62 points. Madewell overall and J. Crew, which owns Madewell, would not pass. And same with Theory as well. It's specifically the Goodwill collection, which is passing. And so that's kind of the theme of the brands that are here on the wannabe category. Same with ASOS, it's their Eco collection, which has passed. They're very centered on these collections, these one-offs, and they use those to promote themselves as sustainable brands instead of integrating best practices across their supply chains, which would be ideal and which is what we expect to see. So that's kind of the main theme that you'll see with the brands here.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall for people to understand in a very simple way, it's that if the harm is more than the good, if the taking from a human exploitation and natural resources standpoint is more than the giving back, then you're in the wannabe category. And I think for a lot of these brands, they've been far better at marketing than with the substance underneath. You know, time and time again, we get these questions of, well, you know, if they're trying with a capsule collection, isn't that a good thing? And I think to Jessie's point, what we're wanting to see is a capsule collection is a wonderful way to experiment. But if you're not integrating this into your core business model, then you're talking about very few units where you're trying to do right by people and the planet versus the hundreds and thousands and millions of units on the other end of your core product, which is doing the exact opposite.
And it also goes to kind of what you spoke to earlier, Ayesha, which is, you know, it's easy to focus on that sustainability in a very small way where you can control the supply chain and the materials. But if your commitment is not to taking those same measures to your entire supply chain and really addressing that to your entire business, then it's just that greenwashing. It's just kind of a distraction. It's kind of look over here at this, you know, thing that we're doing and you know, kind of to divert attention to, you know, all of the things that are still going on within the supply chain. So it's incredibly important that as consumers, we stay very aware of that and how brands, you know, are really understanding that sustainability is becoming more important for consumers and that they're digging deeper. And we have to be very savvy to not be distracted with this greenwashing, with, you know, these small capsule collections that really don't speak to, you know, the holistic business practices of the organization.
Absolutely. And, you know, I've always been amazed at how many sustainable influencers push a lot of this product. And so part of our service to our ambassador community, but also to the industry writ large, is to make this information public so that we can be, you know, publicly able to hold these brands accountable. You know, all the scores are available. You can drill down into them. So we're asking the right questions and that looking behind the taglines of, you know, what is an eco denim collection or what is effortlessly sustainable and where they need to make improvements. And, you know, the other thing is that we are really more of an accountability organization than about cancel culture. And so partly this is also an opportunity for the brands to be in conversation with us and hopefully to improve scores over time. That's certainly something that Jessie does with a lot of the smaller brands that are just trying to get their arms around how they should be reporting and what they should be putting in the public domain.
Absolutely. Yes. Again, we always want to encourage that if you have a brand here that you love and, you know, you really love their aesthetic or you love their product, you know, use that as a catalyst to engage in conversation with them and tell them, hey, I would love to be your customer, or I've been your customer in the past, but you're not doing enough and I need you to do more, you know, because until they receive that overwhelming pressure, and we see the success, you know, we saw the incredible success with that, with the Pay Up Fashion campaign. That was because of individual consumers like you, everyone watching this call, directly engaging with these brands and holding them accountable. So push them further. You know, that's the opportunity that we do have as consumers.
And a question here before we go forward on how do you really ascertain whether someone is greenwashing or truly sustainable? And I think, Jessie, no better person than you to take that question.
Yeah, sure. So on my end, when I'm looking through these brands, I want to see on their website that they're mentioning the people who are making their clothes. So not just saying this product was made in China or Vietnam, for example, but it's always amazing the more detail they have about their process. The first thing I look for is a code of conduct. If they have a code of conduct, that at least tells me they have some idea of what the threats are to people and the planet. But then beyond that, I want to see more detail about the factories. I'd like to see information about them mentioning carbon, about them mentioning water waste, and waste in general. So there are some key words to look out for, but it's really just seeing if they are providing evidence behind the keywords of what's actually happening in their supply chain. So it does take some time to read through, look at interviews that senior people from the brand have done. What are they actually saying? Those are some ways to do that.
Absolutely. Very cool. And guys, please continue to chat into the chat. And yes, we will be sharing, as Caroline mentioned, we will be sharing how and where to find these scores. So you don't have to memorize all this right now. We are going to give you access to this. So let's walk through the up and comers. So, you know, these guys are new on the scene potentially. They are making, you know, some of the efforts. Let's dive into the work that they're doing. So you can see some of these brands. And again, important to note that these do tend to be, you know, smaller brands who, you know, can have that more of a laser focus and more control over their supply chain. There's a lot of diversity here. You can see that there's a lot of jewelry brands that make it on this list. That does seem to be a trend that I see, Jessie. I'd love for you to speak to that. You know, sustainable jewelry, you know, kind of tends to be a new growing category. But a lot of these guys here, Known Supply, that, you know, we've worked with in the past as well. You know, these guys, they do have some really strong points. So it looks like they're on a really good track. You know, what commonalities do you see amongst these brands in terms of what they're focusing on, and, you know, how dedicated they are to this effort?
So I think one of the big things we noticed is a lot of the up and comers have a huge focus on the social side of fashion, which is so important. I mean, often the harder part, I would say, compared to the environment to tackle. But overall, they would have to be addressing both in order to pass. They're all brands that are doing so much more than some of the bigger brands, although they have less resources, but it's because they really care and are not only just branding themselves as sustainable brands, but it's something that's really integrated into their core mission. So a lot of them, you'll see it's quite wide ranging. So some are based in Europe, some are based in the US, Australia even. And I think one thing we're noticing is that there are so many more small brands that are popping up, and there are a lot of startups in the space. And I think that's why you're seeing many more in the jewelry space. But I've also started to see a lot in swimwear as well, and now just general apparel. So it's definitely a growing area. There are many, many more brands that could have fit just in this one section alone. So it's really encouraging to see. Hopefully they can keep this momentum as they continue to develop. And for quite a few of them, it's not their mission to grow and increase consumption. So that's something that's really encouraging as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to some of this ethos of shopping small, shopping locally. You know, one of the reasons that we separated the rock stars and the up and comers is really because of market share and footprint. You know, our ambassador community is very global. Some of these guys are very hyper local. They don't quite have the e-commerce presence. They can't really ship things. I mean, some do, like a Prana or a Known Supply, and others are a lot smaller. And so, to Jessie's point, there is something about the smaller brands where you see a lot of innovation happening. With Able, for example, I just thought it was so fascinating that they published their lowest wages on their website. That's something that if a lot of the bigger brands would do, we'd make a lot of progress.
Yeah, that is, you know, that is something that, you know, I've seen there's been a movement in the industry to publish lowest wages, which I think Nisolo, who did, you know, who is one of our rock stars, did make it onto that. And they were part of that movement to say, hey, we're going to talk about, you know, our lowest wages. Will you show us yours? So that's also another way for you as a consumer to engage with brands, you know, and instead of starting at the top with greenwashing, say, you know, give me the true picture and talk to me about what your lowest wages are so that I can can kind of see where you fall. And guys, yes, for a lot of people, you know, people always want to know, we want to feel good going into the holidays. So yes, please do rely heavily on this so that you can support these local brands, because not only can you feel confident, you know, in the product you're purchasing, but you can feel confident that you are making a positive difference in the life of a garment maker, and supporting a company that's going to be paying attention to these things. So this will be very valuable. I want to keep moving along so that we have time to walk you guys through the directory, because Chelsea has a lot to show us there and it's really exciting. In the meantime, we're going to show you a couple ways to continue to engage with this. We are going to walk you through in the directory how you can request to see a brand to be vetted, or you can get an alert to see that. But also, if you on the call right now work for a brand and you would like to get in touch with our team to kind of, you know, get some ranking, please email Jessie. You know, if you would like to maybe, you know, within your work, you know, I saw some people in the chat talking about stylists and things like that. If you're a stylist and you want to make sure that, you know, some of the brands you're working with, you know, kind of see where they fall, please engage with us. Definitely engage directly with the brands. There's a lot of power in asking the brands directly, hey, are you a Remake approved brand? You know, where do you fall? I haven't seen you there. You know, what's your score? What are you working on? Definitely engage directly with these brands. There's so much power when they hear from you as consumers, because the consumers are what keep them in business and have the power to really drive change. But please also get in touch with us directly if there's, you know, more information you need, or a way that we can get involved with you, whether it's with your company or a certain organization, so that we can continue to add some insight here. I'm going to jump out of my screen here.
Rebecca, as you're unsharing your screen, that I wanted to share with you all is, you know, this was months and months of stakeholder engagement with a lot of industry experts. We also talked to brands on the quiet, you know, there was a lot of engagement there. And as you'll see, this report has been endorsed by the fashion chair over at the California College of Arts, and then my dear friend Timo Risson, who used to be the sustainability professor over at Parsons, but now teaches at the University of Sydney. And the reason this is important is that, you know, a lot of the sustainability in fashion research is currently also co-opted by brands. And so the fact that academia, these guys are the co-founders of the Union for Concerned Fashion Researchers, that this really is about grounding it in science, in data, and essentially not letting the industry decide what they're going to measure and then essentially applaud themselves for that measurement. So, you know, it really is going to be important for us to have a counter narrative to the industry on what truly is sustainable.
Thank you so much. Chelsea, I'm going to turn it over to you to share your screen, to walk us directly through the directory. I didn't mean to say that twice. To walk us through the directory live so that everybody can see the different ways in which you can engage with this.
Great, thank you, Rebecca. And if you could just give me screen sharing privileges, I will pull up the directory. So as Ayesha and Jessie and Rebecca were talking about the transparency report, I saw a lot of questions popping up in the chat. Are these scores going to be available on our website? Where are these brands getting their points from? So the great news is yes, and yes. These scores are going to be available on our website. You're going to be able to look into reports to actually see where these brands are getting their scores from. So if you're on the main Remake website, you'll notice now that we have a new tab called Brand Directory. So this is a new tool that we're super excited about. We've spent months and months building this, and it's a way that you can actually search your brands and really see what it is they're doing right and what it is they're doing wrong. So previously, I had also seen in the chat, some of you mentioned we had an approved sustainable brands list. So we've sort of gone in a new direction. Previously, where we would only list brands that held our seal of approval, we're now digging much more into our advocacy roots, and we've decided to reframe our directory as not only a shopping guide, but also an educational tool, a transparency tool. So we are now also listing brands that have not received our seal of approval on our website. So to walk you guys through it, you'll see here, there's a directory search bar. You'll see you can search brands by these transparency report categories we went over. You can search brands by price. Right here, you can learn more about the rating system. If you click on this link, it will take you to the transparency report. So if you want to share it with people, you can find it there. And then you can also search brands by the category. As Rebecca was saying, if you are someone who works for a brand and you want to find out if you pass Remake seal of approval, you can click here and you can actually submit your brand to us. That will go directly to Jessie, who is responsible for managing what brands we're vetting, and we will let you know if you've passed our seal of approval. So to take you guys into a page, let's say you were looking for a brand that sold accessories. So you would click on accessories, and let's say you wanted to look at Nisolo. You can click on a brand page. And what you'll see when you go there is you'll have the total score for the brand as well as the price category. What you'll also see, which is very exciting, is sort of what areas the brand is excelling in, what areas they're sort of not doing well in. You can see for Nisolo, they're doing great on the human and labor side. They could definitely step up their game when it comes to the eco side and sustainable raw materials. For the first time ever, we're publicly releasing the individual score reports. So if you look at this and you're like, okay, whoa, they're doing not so great here with sustainable raw materials, I want to learn more, you can actually click on score report. And this will take you to the actual report that Jessie is using when she looks at these brands. You can see on it when the brand was last vetted, as long as all of these questions that we're looking for when we look at a brand, right? Does the company publicly disclose information about where its products are produced? Do they list the lowest wage for their makers, et cetera, et cetera. So these are the actual questions we're using, and there's a very detailed score breakdown over here. So that's something that's new. We've never done that before. We've never sort of shown you guys the back end of where these scores are coming from. We're hoping that will be a really useful tool for if you do want to engage with a brand, if you do want to write to a brand, you'll know specifically what it is that they're doing right, what it is that they're doing wrong, and how to talk about that. You'll also find below each brand that we have a briefing about what we think they're doing right or wrong here as well. And if you go back to the main page, so that's one way you can search is by category. The other way you can search is simply by listing the brand on here. So let's say you want to look for Nike. You can search Nike. They should come up. If you search a brand and you don't see it come up, if you scroll down, you can click right here. You can give us, let us know what brand you want us to vet, and then we'll take that into consideration. And if we do vet them, we will let you know as soon as they are up on the website. Please make use of that tool. We want to know what brands you guys want vetted. So Nike is a brand, as you guys saw in the transparency report, that did not pass our test. So you'll see here, instead of getting the seal of approval, they're getting a thumbs down. Again, you can look at their score report. You can see where they're doing well, where they're not doing well. Another important feature with this directory is, as we're running campaigns, if there are brands that we are actively campaigning against, we will note that on their brand profile page. So you'll see here that Nike is a brand we are currently petitioning through Pay Up Fashion, as well as a direct call to action of what you can do to help us with that campaign. Something worth noting is that right now with this launch, we currently only have the 40 brands listed on the transparency report. Over the coming weeks, we are going to add, I believe it's over 400 brands that we have vetted over the past few years. So we will be adding more and more brands, but sort of as a soft launch, we have these 40 brands on here that you can look for. And then, like I said, let's say you wanted to look up Gap. It's not coming up. It's not a brand that we've vetted yet. You would click here, you would let us know, I want to know more about Gap. We'll get that email, we'll vet them, we'll let you know once we've vetted them. So this is the directory tool. This is where to find it, how to use it. And we do hope, yes, you can use it as a shopping guide, definitely, especially as we're coming into the holiday season, but we really want it to also be looked at as an educational tool, as an advocacy tool, a way to learn more about brands, good and bad, and a way to engage with them.
And please, and we really do want you to engage with this. So as an example, if you were interested in Gap and you didn't see them there, please do let us know, because we can look at that. And if we see a bunch of requests coming in for a specific brand, then we know that this is something that consumers are really paying attention to, something that everybody's really interested in. So if you don't tell us, we don't know. So please, your engagement with this really does support our work and help kind of guide where we're going. And again, your engagement with this in terms of, you see a brand that you love and you see that we are petitioning them, please take that a step further. Don't just kind of say, oh, okay, I'm not going to shop from them and log off. Please take it a step further. Sign the Pay Up Fashion petition if you haven't yet. Directly message a brand on social media, hold them accountable. We put all of this work out there because we want you to be able to work with it, and to work with us. And it's so critical that it isn't just a report that you look at, kind of as a checklist, but that you look at it as a way to, be an engaged consumer and to have these conversations with brands and hold them accountable and continue to push everyone forward. So your engagement makes a really huge difference for us. Please share this report. Again, please tell people about it, encourage everyone to use it as a resource. The more engagement we get, the more robust of a tool it can be, the more attention that we can get for brands, realizing that this is something that consumers and the industry is paying attention to. So please take it a step further. It really does, help support our work. Thank you so much. That's awesome, Chelsea. Thank you for showing us that. Okay, guys. I'm so excited. That is like the most amazing tool ever, by the way. And so many people have been asking for this so long. And it's so true what Jessie said, to find certain information, you kind of have to go to so many different places. So I know I'm a little biased, but I think this is like the most amazing tool that's out there. And it's certainly, again, I might be biased, but it's certainly the most comprehensive that I have seen in my work. And this is what I do for a living. So it really is amazing, guys. And the amount of work that Jessie and Chelsea and everyone in the Remake team has put into this is just absolutely incredible. So thank you guys so much for all of your very hard work for making this available to everyone. This is so amazing. I just wanted to, Ayesha, before I go into some wrap up on the call and talk about some exciting events that are coming up, is there anything that you would also like to leave everybody with, or a call to action that you would like them to engage with to help, really make this work even more profound?
Yeah, I mean, you all as the community are the heartbeat of everything we do is in service to you all. And so I would just leave it with, engage with the directory. If you have ideas of brands or ways to make the site better, this is our first beta. Over time, it's only when we use it that it'll get better and stronger. I really do want us to start to be thinking of ourselves as citizens rather than consumers. I think for too long, we've talked about somehow just buying our way into a better fashion industry. And by integrating some of our campaigning, the hope is that we can both take the offenders to account and then support the brands who are the rock stars. So really it is about getting your feedback. Katrina here, who does our social media, will be sharing graphics and easy ways to get that report out in the public domain. If you write for a blog, if you're a journalist, if you're a writer, we also want to get more press to pay attention to this. If you're a brand that wants to engage and have more of a conversation on why you scored one way or another, let's talk. I really do think that the more we put out in the public domain for this largely deregulated industry, the better it's going to be in service of all of us as citizens, but at the end of the day, also for the garment makers. So I'm just so excited that we could share this with you all, but would love feedback in the coming weeks and months.
Thank you guys so much. Please, please, please do continue to engage with us as you do so well and have always done. It really makes a huge difference. So I'm going to share my screen one last time to give you a little sneak preview of something very exciting that's coming up. So we have an event coming up on Wednesday, December 9th. It is from 5 p.m. Pacific time to 6:30 Pacific time. And it is our birthday fundraiser. So Cocktails for a Cause and Styling event. This is gonna be so fun. So I'm gonna tell you guys what this is all about. Okay, So what we're going to be doing is we're going to have a celebrity and wardrobe stylist, Tara Sweenan. She'll share her essential how-to guide for styling with her expert tips on how to choose, you know, what's best for you and ways to build a purpose-driven business in fashion. So that is so fun. We will continue the festivities with cocktails hosted by Remake Ambassador and Catcher in the Style founder, Tanya Peck. She's on this call. I saw her join while sipping house cocktails. So, okay, so let me kind of give you guys the scoop here, how this works. So it's a fundraising event. So what we're encouraging you to do is to help raise money through ticket sales, you know, for the ambassadors to get entry to this event. And that can include you. So if you raise $100, in other words, if you sell 4 $25 tickets, then you get free entry to the event. If you sell $250, then you not only get entry to the event, but you also get a bottle of house alcohol sent to you to sip while you're enjoying this fun event. If you raise $500, you can get free entry to the event, a free bottle of house cocktails, and a chance to win a one-on-one styling session with Tara Sweenan, which is super cool. So, you know, guys, it's important to note that the things that you see, like we just presented, you know, with our directory, with our transparency report, all of this is funded by the, you know, your donations and, you know, the work of our donors and our partners. So your donation, you know, directly contributes to how we can provide this content for you, how we can provide these tools for you, and the impact that we can make in our activism and advocacy, you know, for championing the rights of garment makers all around the world and helping to bring you documentaries like our Maiden series that we put together. It helps grow our ambassadorship within local communities and our programs. And, you know, it just really makes a huge difference. So we want to encourage you to engage and help us do fundraising. And of course, we always want to have fun and make it exciting for you. So we are going to be following up in the email recap where we share the link to the recording of today's call. We will share the link to the transparency report. We will share the link on our webpage to engage in the directory, and we'll share the details about this fun event that's coming up that you can help engage with. So I just want to say thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. This is such an exciting tool. Please continue to engage with it. Please continue to engage with the Pay Up Fashion campaign. Continue to give your feedback and ask questions. Ayesha, I'm going to turn it over to you real quick because I see you want to say something.
You should always have the last word, Rebecca. But, you know, I was just saying it's November and it's a time to be thinking about gratitude. It's been really a terribly hard year for many of us. I'm thinking about so many of you as I know we're entering second lockdowns. And so I hope that these calls continue to be a source of light and inspiration for you all. You know, together we are coming into our girl power to make a difference. And so just know I am so grateful to each and every one of you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's important to remember you know, what we're truly thankful for and how much we do have to be thankful for and how much our efforts as a citizen, as a global citizen, and as a consumer can make in the rights and the freedoms and the well-being of the garment makers all around the world. And that's really what, you know, gets all of us up. It's what makes us excited. It's why everyone on our Remake team is so dedicated to this work. So just by you being here, we feel supported and we feel loved. So thank you for joining. Everyone has a very busy schedule. So it's always awesome that this call is always maxed out and there's always people waiting in the waiting room to get in. So thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you spending your time. We'll follow up with all these resources, continue to ask questions, continue to let us know what you need. Please continue to give feedback. We're always working to improve all of this for you. We're so excited that we have this tool. Thank you for engaging with it. Everyone's been chatting in with lots of comments. So again, please continue to engage with your local communities and your fellow ambassadors so that you guys can share resources. Always chat with us on social media. If you are attending this call and you're not currently an ambassador, come on board. We would love to have you. There's so many perks to being an ambassador. There's insider calls and insider access to events. There's ways to deepen and strengthen your connection with this Remake community by being an ambassador, and so many cool tools and little perks that you get for doing that. You can sign up to be an ambassador on our website and learn more about that as well. So please do that as well. We'll never spam you or bother you. It's always amazing content like this that will just, really strengthen your work as well. So we're right at time. So I want to say thank you so much for everyone. Thank you, Chelsea and Jessie, for your incredibly hard work on this. Thank you, Caroline, for always monitoring the chat and giving everyone all those great links. Sam is on here too, our Director of Education. Thank you for being amazing, Sam. Katrina is here. She's the one that helps power this message, and Lindsay on our social media, and Ayesha, our fearless leader, who is always fearlessly leading us forward. So thank you, everyone. You're all amazing. Have a wonderful November, and we will see you in December. Bye, guys.